be saved on YouTube for future viewing. Before we start, I also want to point out a few of the wonderful resources we have posted on the screen here, including the link to the official conference website, the Slack channel, the LD4 2023 YouTube videos, the Twitter hashtag at hashtag LD4_2023, and more. This session will include 60 minutes of presentation, followed by a 30-minute discussion period. If you have any questions or you'd like to interact with the presenter or any of the other participants, we encourage you to use the Slack feature to submit your questions, or the raise hand feature in Zoom so that you can be called on. Our wonderful speakers and organizers for the session are Shuai Wang and Andrei Nestorov. Shuai Wang is a PhD researcher at the Vrije University Amsterdam in the Netherlands, where he studies artificial intelligence, focus on linked open data and knowledge graphs. Andrei Nestorov is a PhD student at the Center for Mathematics and Computer Science in Amsterdam, studying how computational methods help bring out multiple viewpoints about controversial topics and cultural heritage data. As an independent data journalist, he uses data-driven reporting to uncover hate crimes based on sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, without further ado, I will turn the time over to Shuai and Andrei.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming to the session. So as mentioned, Andrei and I will be chairing the session. I wonder if we should share our screen to so that you can see the slides. Okay. Can you see my screen? Yeah. Okay. Yes. So we have. So it's really an honor that we have three very knowledgeable speaker today. They are KJ Rawson from Northeastern University. We also have so these are basically people who are either behind Homosaurus, or people who are working on the translation, or who have been using the translation of Homosaurus or related resources. So KJ is one of those people who are actually working on Homosaurus. Sandrine, welcome. Sandrine is in Canada, in Quebec, and then she's working also on Homosaurus, but more looking into translating it into French and then use it. We also have Pasar is currently translating Homosaurus into 10 different languages that are used in India. We really have a great ambition to make Homosaurus available in as many languages as possible. So that's why the session is not only to present to you what is currently going on, but also to discuss with you what could have been done and what could be done in near future to make it really available, to make this a piece of resource available as soon as possible. Andrei, please say hi to us.
Yeah, hello everyone. I don't have much to add. I suggest we start right away.
Great. So our first speaker is KJ, and please take the screen. Thanks.
Sure. Let me go ahead and get the slides back going. Actually, Shuai, would you mind advancing the slides for me?
Oh yeah, sure, I can do that.
That'd be great. Thanks so much.
Oops.
While Shuai's doing that, I'll just start by saying hello, everyone. As Shuai mentioned, my name is KJ Rawson. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm an associate professor of English and women's gender and sexuality studies at Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts, which is on the land of the Wampanoag people, as well as the Massachusetts people. So as we get started, I want to first say thank you to Shuai and Andrei for organizing this panel. It's very generous of them to have done the work of submitting the proposal and hosting us today. Shuai, if you could go to the next slide, please, that'd be great. So my role here on this panel and my time will be helping to introduce the Homosaurus, give a bit of background on how it came about, its purpose and its mission, and give you a sense of where we're at so far with some of our preliminary organizing and working towards a multilingual version of the Homosaurus. So as you can see here, the Homosaurus is an international linked data vocabulary. Our mission is to enhance other broad subject term vocabularies. So it's not really meant to be a standalone vocabulary. Instead, it's meant to support other resources and work alongside them. It's a robust and cutting edge thesaurus, and its purpose is to advance the discoverability of LGBTQ plus resources and information. So I want to explain for those who might not be aware of subject term vocabularies, I thought I would just give a very quick explanation of what they are. So subject term vocabularies are controlled sets of terms that are used by information professionals in cultural heritage institutions. So places like libraries, archives, and museums. And these vocabularies allow researchers to discover materials based on topic or theme. So it's similar to tagging in social media and other online environments, but the difference is that it's very controlled, meaning there's only a discrete set of terms and values that are possible in those fields. So at least in the US context, the most widely used and famous subject term vocabulary is the Library of Congress subject headings. These have been widely critiqued for many reasons, particularly in terms of their inclusion of queer and trans terminology, and often their slowness to adapt to new terms and vocabulary as it comes out. So that's in part where the Homosaurus comes in. Right now, the Homosaurus includes 2,838 LGBTQ plus related terms, and it can be used in any cultural heritage institution. And as I mentioned, our goal is to increase discoverability and access. I'll just add a quick note that, of course, the accessibility of LGBTQ plus resources is always important, but especially right now in a global landscape where LGBTQ plus people and human rights are under daily attack. Next slide, please, Shuai. Thank you. So this slide took me a very long time, but I think it's really helpful to get a sense of the history of the Homosaurus and how it emerged. So though it's a cutting edge and recent project, it has decades of history dating back. In fact, one of the co-founders of the Homosaurus, Jack Vanderval, is here in the panel today. Maybe he'll sneak in to answer a question later if that's helpful. So you can see that it goes back to 1982, where a subject term list was created by Homodoc. A subject term list named Homodoc was created by ILIA as a keywords list. And this resource was used as a comprehensive in-house subject term vocabulary, which means that they used it to fully describe all of their resources, as opposed to using additional subject term vocabularies to enhance it. In 1993, it merged with another Amsterdam-based archives to form the Queer Thesaurus. And then in 1997, it was translated into English, and that is when it became the Homosaurus. We refer to that as version 0. In 2013, Jack and Ellen Greenblatt worked together to expand the Homosaurus and create its hierarchical structure. So prior to that, it was a flat vocabulary. And so the hierarchical structure means that terms are now set in relation to each other in broader or narrower relations or related terms where they are along a horizontal axis. So I came into the awareness of the project around 2015. So at that time, I was in the process of creating the Digital Transgender Archive. And as we started to process our first few batches of materials, I realized that we did not have the proper subject terms to be able to describe our resources. And so I had heard about a talk that Jack had given at a conference. And so I reached out and he was kind enough to share the Word doc version of the Homosaurus with me. And I thought it was a phenomenal resource, was super excited about it. And I wanted to implement it in the Digital Trans Archive. Our developer, Stephen Anderson, who is phenomenal, immediately said, well, we're not just going to leave it as a back-end resource, we're going to transform it into a linked data vocabulary. So not only can you use it with the DTA, but anyone else can use it as well. So once that happened, we realized that, we could start doing more with the Homosaurus. So I reached out to Jack, and he and I established an editorial board in 2016. And that board has been meeting monthly ever since. Many of the same folks who joined the board back in 2016 are still on it. We've made a number of changes. It's actually even hard to quantify all of the changes that we've made since the editorial board began meeting. But the two key moments, which I've marked on this timeline, is that in 2019, we released a dramatically narrowed version of the Homosaurus. We determined that we didn't want to have the Homosaurus try to do all the things anymore. Instead, we really wanted to focus on what we knew we could do well, which was LGBTQ plus terms. So when we released that version, I think we cut maybe 800 to 1,000 terms at that point. And we released version 2 of the vocabulary. We made a fairly significant mistake in that, that we had our URIs be based on the term itself rather than a stable identifier. So when we released 3.0, just a few years later, what we did was we transformed all of the URIs from term-based URIs to alphanumeric identifiers, and that was a really big shift. And we also added initial language support at that time. So we're now currently on 3.4, version 3.4. All right, next slide, please. So I want to give you a sense of who's behind the project. This is the Homosaurus editorial board. It's a great group of information professionals and academics and practitioners, so folks from across a wide range of contexts. These folks are so dedicated to this project, I can't even tell you how much work they put in behind the scenes. As I mentioned, we meet on a monthly basis to oversee the development of the vocabulary. This is primarily the English version. We also have an asynchronous approval process. So it's not just that we talk about every single term, but that we also, for terms that are more obvious or don't require a lot of conversation, we do that in between meetings as well. So just to give you a sense of our growth, we release new versions of the vocabulary every 6 months, and the version that we released this past June included 532 new terms. Next slide, please. So it was clear right from the start that we wanted to include more languages with the Homosaurus. It already began as a Dutch language resource, and then it was translated into English a bit along its way. But we had been hearing from users of the vocabulary that they wanted to be able to include more languages and expand out almost as soon as we released the project. So what we've done so far to work toward that goal is that we now add language tags to all preferred terms and alternative terms. So we're trying to destabilize the English bias of the vocabulary as we are currently hosting it. The other thing that we do is have a field called Other Preferred Terms. And so in that field, we can add language tags so that it can be mapped across to different languages. We only just began meeting as a multi-language working group, and several of the members are here. This is what the panel consists of, folks from this working group. And we've only met a few times starting in spring 2023. So we're really just starting to get a sense of the landscape and what it is that we're trying to develop. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I wanted to talk a bit about a grant that we have that we'll be working on from members of the board. So for 2023 to 2026, beginning actually this September, Dr. Marika Siefer and I will be leading up an initiative that is supporting the development of a Spanish language Homosaurus. Our aim is to release 1,200 to 1,600 terms, and we're doing this project with deep collaborations. We're working with three main collaborators: the Arizona Queer Archives, which is an independent grassroots archives, the San Francisco Public Library, obviously a huge library system, and the UCLA Chicano Studies Research Center, so a university-based research center. These three contexts provide a really nice range of different environments where the Homosaurus can be used and applied both in Spanish and in English to enhance the discoverability of LGBTQ+ resources in those contexts. So we're going to be approaching this with a combination of machine translation, thanks to Shuai, who's always enthusiastic about supporting this work. And we're going to be then verifying that with field experts. And then we're going to be doing some ground up vocabulary development as well. So it's not just top down using the English version as a translation, but instead also thinking about terms that do not exist in English, which is a really core principle for how we are approaching this multi-language environment for this vocabulary. The other thing that we're working to do is developing a multi-language backend architecture and front-end functionality. So we have some of the coding already started for that, but thinking about the different ways that users on the front end can interact with that is something that we're just developing right now. And my last slide, please. So I just wanted to share some ways to connect with the project. So you can see the URL for the project at the top. If you want to reach out to us, that's our Gmail address. You can also contact me personally. If you want to join our user community, there's a couple hundred folks that are on that email list. And we also have a Slack workspace where we do collaborative term development and lots of chatting about the project. And I'm happy to share that invitation for folks who reach out to me directly. So that's what I have to share. Thank you. Shuai, I think you're still muted.
Thank you very much. So indeed, that's really nice introduction, so that people can really follow what how Homosaurus was developed and what Homosaurus is like now, and of course the future plans. So good luck with all the project that is coming. So next, one second, I couldn't.
Do you mind changing my slides to Shuai?
Sorry. Oh yeah, sure. I can.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Next week we have Sandrine from the Université de Quebec, Rimouski.
Yes.
Sorry for the French. Yeah. So please take over the stage.
Okay, so my name is Sandrine Vachon, and I'm going to tell you about the French translation of the Homosaurus, how it all began, what are the challenges that we face, and where we are now in the translation process. You can change slide, please. So I work for the Université du Québec à Rimouski. It is a university in Quebec that have around 6,000 students on 2 campuses. The main campus is in Rimouski and the other one is in Lévis. I am personally based in Rimouski and I work as a reference librarian. So I also index the books that I purchase for the students and teachers in my discipline. You can change, great. My interest for the translation of the Homosaurus started when one of my colleagues saw a presentation made by a member of the Homosaurus board. So she thought that it would interest me. I watched the recorded presentation and my colleague was right. It sparked my interest right away for different reasons, but mostly because when I index books related to the LGBTQ+ community, I am often confronted to the fact that there is a lack of good descriptors related to the subject in the traditional control vocabularies. And sometimes the words that are used in those vocabularies discourage me, sometimes make me angry because they feel reducing. So I wanted to change that, and translating the Homosaurus so I could use it at work seemed like a perfect solution to this problem. I also knew that using Homosaurus in my indexing would make it easier for my students to locate the LGBTQ+ related documents. We have 18 universities in Quebec. 3 of them are English-speaking and the others are French-speaking. The English-speaking universities use LCSH vocabulary to index books in English, but in French, we use another vocabulary, which is called Le Répertoire des Vedettes Matières de l'Université Laval, or RVM. I'm going to use the acronym RVM in the rest of the presentation. You can change slide, please. So the RVM is a translation and an adaptation of other vocabularies. So the Library of Congress subject headings, Canadian subject headings, medical subject headings, art and architecture thesaurus. And they also have a link with Rameau, which is the thesaurus of Bibliothèque Nationale de France. Because a lot of the terms in the RVM comes from the LCSH, they have some issues that come from that vocabulary, especially with the terms related to the indigenous and LGBTQ plus communities. We know that the RVM team is well aware of that and trying to improve their descriptors, but right now, LGBTQ plus is a rejected term in the RVM, and the accepted term for LGBTQ plus people is minorité sexuelle, which means sexual minorities. And that is a problematic way of representing the LGBTQ plus community. The RVM team can create new terms that do not come from other vocabularies, and it could have been a way for us to resolve those issues around the LGBTQ plus descriptors, but it needs to be related to a specific document or book. So we knew that changes in the RVM concerning the LGBTQ plus culture would have happened very slowly, and we wanted the changes to happen faster. So I contacted the Homosaurus board to know if there was already a French translation going on somewhere. I talked with TJ, who just presented the Homosaurus, and he was very enthusiastic about the project of having a French translation. So I decided to form a group and get to work. The 18 universities in Quebec are already used to work in partnership. We have the same research tool in all the university libraries in Quebec. We have working groups on different subjects. So it was obvious to me that I had to use this training to find people who wanted to work with me on the French translation. So in the summer 2022, we set up the group. It started out with 7 people, and eventually 2 people had to leave the group. So we are now 5 people in the group. Next slide, please. So these are the people working with me. There is Hortense Chapard from Montreal University, Michael David Miller from McGill University, Philippe Cadieux from Université Laval, and Philippe is also a documentary resources specialist at the RVM. So we were really proud that the RVM team wanted to have somebody in our group. So we know that what we're talking about in our meetings goes back to the RVM also. And there are 2 people in my institution, so Suzy Pelletier and myself. There were discussions at some point of doing an international French translation because there were universities in Belgium and in Switzerland who were interested. But finally, they decided not to participate right now, but to keep an eye on the project's progress. So it became a Quebec French translation. And I must say that it made things easier for us in the end because we quickly realized that there were a lot of terms that were not the same in the French we speak in Quebec compared to the French that is spoken in Europe. So we do keep in mind, though, that they might jump in the project at some point, and that would be great. We could then have 2 distinct French translations of the Homosaurus, and that could be possible with the Homosaurus website interface. The people in the group are volunteers. You can go back, please. The people in the group are volunteers, so a part of the work we do for the translation is made at work, but sometimes also outside working hours, and we meet usually once every 2 months, but we will be soon moving our meetings to 1 Zoom meeting a month. So how does the translation group work? I did the first phase of the translation in the summer 2022. I did the first translation of all the Homosaurus terms by myself. It was a first draft. I didn't spend a lot of time working on each term individually. I wanted to do this translation to give a basis to the librarians who were going to work with me. So we had our first meeting in October 2022. We divided the list into sections, each person having their own section to translate. We use Google Drive to work on the same document. And so the second phase looked like this. You can change slide. So there are a lot of French words there. I'm going to explain what you see. So this is a part of the document we were working on. So in the first column, there's the name of the translator. So we are now in the section of Hortense. We have the number of the term in the list for a reference point. Then we have the link to the Homosaurus webpage for each particular term. And then the term without the link if we needed to copy and paste it easily. Then the column called Traduction en français. This is the first translation that I made. And in the column next to that, there are some suggestions of terms that could also be good translations. Then we have a column for different references and comments. Usually we used to paste websites that were related to the terms we were working on just there. And in the next column, it is the translation that was chosen by the translator. So for example, on the first list, there is the translation that was chosen by Hortense for AIDS organizations, which is Organisme de lutte contre le sida. Then we had some rejected terms or alternative terms in the next column, some notes, and then the English definition that we took in the Homosaurus and that we translated in French. So we had this for every term in the vocabulary. You can change slide, please, try. So to help us find a good translation, we use different dictionaries and translators. We use the Dictionnaire terminologique in Quebec. We use the Termium from the Translation Bureau of Canada. We use the REM. We use DeepL also, mostly for the definitions. And we use different LGBTQ+ websites like Interligne, Alter Hero. But we knew that for most of the terms, we would not find it in the regular dictionary. So we searched in newspaper articles, blog posts, and forum posts. And this whole process took us about a year. And is the translation finished at this point? No, because when we chose the term that seemed right, we often had questions or we were unsure about certain things that we wanted to validate with the other members of the group. So we took notes, and then the third phase started. It is the reviewing phase. That's where we are at right now. You can change slide. It looks like this. It's the same document. But there is the section of Suzy. So the reviewing phase starts at the column where you can check a box. So there's the name of the translator next to that. So I was the translator for the section, the reviewer, sorry, for this section. So I had to write if I agreed with the translation that had been chosen by the translator. If I did not agree, I would write another suggestion in the next column and explain why I thought that the suggestion was better. And if I wanted to discuss this, I would check the box in the column with the check boxes. So we have a lot of check boxes right now. We had a lot of terms that we want to talk about. So it's the reason why we chose to meet more often from now on. And we know that for certain terms, we will not be able to find a good translation within the group. So we made a partnership with an LGBTQ+ advocacy group in Quebec to help us with the terms that we are unsure about. It's a group with a lot of volunteers. They give presentations in primary and secondary schools in Quebec on sexual diversity and gender plurality. So we are very happy with this partnership and we look forward to working with them. You can change slide, please. So let's talk about the positives and negatives of the way we have organized the work. Some negatives first. We have different workloads. Obviously, some people have more time to dedicate to this than others, and it can lead to some imbalances between the work done by each participant. Sometimes we had difficulties to meet the deadlines. Actually, we had to give ourselves deadlines if we wanted to keep things moving forward, and when they were not met, it could become demotivating at times for some of us. And it takes more time than artificial intelligence translators, of course. But on the positive side, even if it takes longer to do, at the end of the process, we know that we will be satisfied and more certain with the results. We know that we will not probably not be 100% sure about all of the terms, but we are confident with the result because of the process that we went through. Each person involved in the project brings their own sensibility and experience to the table, and also working with an LGBTQ+ community group is a good way for us to assure that everybody feels represented in the French translation of the Homosaurus. And we'll also have different perspectives as librarians. So some of us are reference librarians, so we tend to think more about the way the students will search in the catalogs. Some of us are catalogers, and we tend to think more about the indexer's point of view. So that combination is, I think, one of our strongest assets. And also working with librarians from other institutions means that the French version of Homosaurus will be used in many Quebec libraries when it will be launched, and that many people will want to promote it. So that's great. Some issues we faced while translating the Homosaurus. Well, French is a gendered language. That was our biggest issue. In English, a lot of the terms are already quite neutral, so people with different genders can feel represented by these terms, but in French, it's different. Nouns usually have a feminine form and a masculine form, and it's the same with adjectives. So for romantic authors, we could have decided to translate it to auteur aromantique, which is the masculine form, because in French, the masculine form wins over the feminine. Sounds terrible, but still like that. But we felt it wasn't inclusive. We then thought about using the median point to combine the feminine and masculine forms that would have given auteuriste aromantique. But the midpoint is not recommended because it doesn't work well with machines used by people with hearing difficulties. So we decided not to use it. We really wanted to be inclusive. Then we could have mixed the masculine form and the feminine form in one expression, but then it would not have represented non-binary people. So we talked a lot about this issue. We also talked about it with KJ. And finally, we decided to translate the English term with more neutral expression first. So in French, romantic authors would become personne autrice aromantique, and then to create more specific, narrower terms. So the feminine form, autrice aromantique, the masculine form, auteur aromantique, and the non-binary form, personne autrice aromantique non-binaire. And this issue will probably be faced with all the translations of gendered languages like Spanish, for example. One other issue is that some English expressions do not have French translations at all, especially with slang terms, slurs, or historic terms. For example, surrobabies, people born through surrogacy, or both these, people who have 2 or more LGBTQ plus parents or caregivers. Those are terms that we could not find a French equivalent to. For an historic term, an example is GRID, gay-related immune deficiency, which was the original name for AIDS. Well, we found out that it was never translated to French officially. On the web, we see different attempts of translation, but it seems like it was not used in French at the time, so we decided to keep it in English in our French translation. There are some terms that have not found their translation in French yet. They do not exist. For example, queer baiting. Maybe it will come with the years, but right now we commonly use the word in English in the French language. And there are some other terms that come from other languages in the Homosaurus. There are a lot of terms in the Homosaurus related to terms describing different genders in different parts of the world, or words describing cultural or ethnic affiliations. And in French, when the word does not exist, usually when we're writing a text, we indicate that the word is not in French by placing it in quotation marks or in italics, but we could not do that with the thesaurus. So we have decided to indicate the culture or region from which the term came from in brackets. So for Durrani, we decided to write culture bengali, and for Afafin, culture tamoine en Nouvelle-Zélande. When there was a little bit of context to the expression, we decided to keep it like that. For like, so an example is for Kashmiri bisexual people, we decided to translate it to personne bisexuelle Kashmiri. We also use the same technique with words in Japanese related to the mangas and anime fandom. Those words do not have French equivalent. They are already in use, and we use it in Japanese when we speak in French. And we also use this technique with some words that are related specifically to the American culture. So what is the next phase? After the reviewing phase, we'll be ready to send a translation to the Homosaurus board so they can be added to their website. And with the French translation group, we'll continue our meetings so we can translate the terms that will come up in the future of the Homosaurus, and also add some terms that come from our culture. And we can't wait to start indexing the books in our libraries with the French version of Homosaurus. I gave my contact information right there. So if you have questions about the presentation or the French translation of the Homosaurus, you can reach out to me anytime with my email address or my phone number at work. And I'm just going to end the presentation by talking about the mini Homosaurus. So it's a selection of 140 terms from the Homosaurus that were translated to French. So Shuai asked me to choose 100 terms or so that had been easy to translate into French, to build up a small collection of terms that could be translated easily into other languages using artificial intelligence. So Shuai, if it's okay with you, I will let you explain what is the mini Homosaurus and what you want to do with this project.
Yeah, thank you. So I would like to take over from here because I think there's something that I would like to say, more like a broadcasting to people who like to make their own contribution. So Homosaurus, as you know, is big. It takes a lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of thinking to make the translation. So thanks so much for the effort. Now we have a mini Homosaurus that is so far tested on French. That is so small that it's just like 2 pages of two A4 page that fits into two A4 pages. This is a really great place for you to start if you think that you like to make a contribution, but then you don't really know where to start. This is the place that you can start. So I added this slide just to tell you there's actually more resources that we're watching. So this mini Homosaurus gives us in a way a test data set that we can perform some tests on. So of course we are also taking into consideration, for example, the frequency of terms in the Queerlit, which is the Swedish version that is based on Homosaurus, but then was extended to covering more literature. And then we also have the current how Homosaurus is used in ILIA. There you have all the frequency, which shows how much certain terms in Homosaurus are used. Basically, that means how many books or articles or items associated with this text. Of course, the hierarchy of Homosaurus itself are also something we would like to take into consideration. So if you take all these things into consideration, then hopefully soon we'll be able to have such a mini Homosaurus that covers terms that are easy to translate and then frequently being used in applications, but also on its own, it forms a self-sufficient hierarchy. So of course, using this mini Homosaurus, we can then validate the accuracy of some machine translation tools. So this is particularly going to be important for those languages that are difficult to evaluate. For example, if you come from Mongolia or Ukraine, or in NLP we call this low resource languages. So this could be a place where you can test a few of these tools and then see which one performs the best. So anyway, so this is something we are working on, and hopefully we'll get some results soon. Thanks again for the talk. So we'll leave all the questions to later, and we have one last speaker. I will stop sharing because I think this. Pasa, are you ready to share your screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, please take over the stage.
Is it visible now?
Yes, we can see your screen. Yes.
Yeah. So good evening to everybody. Presently at India it is 7:30 p.m. we started. Now it's almost 8:10. So greetings from India, and I'm not quite sure whether my project or my presentation is in a presentable form, because this is an ongoing project, only a baby steps we have taken. But anyway, Surai assured me that, okay, we can go with it, so let us try. So what we are trying to do here, as KJ said, in the beginning, that we are basically using different knowledge organization tools for for the purpose of retrieval of different library materials, different information resources, and different knowledge organization, global knowledge organization tools we are also using in this subcontinent: India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. Mainly Library of Congress subject heading list and Dewey Decimal Classification as a generic thing. And every day our library professionals found that these tools are slightly sexist and homophobic in nature. Most of the core terms related to the LGBTQ domain, they do not include, or if include, then not always the meaning is clear and the proper network of terms are clear. So we people in India, library professionals in India, we were in search of a comprehensive vocabulary control device which can help us to manage different kind of LGBTQI resources. And eventually we discovered Homosaurus, and we made a journey that one of the prerequisite of using any vocabulary control device in Indian libraries is that we need to integrate that vocabulary inside our automated system, like library automation software, digital library system, where we can pick up the subject access terms like mark tag 650 or Dublin core metadata format element like dc.subject and so on. So we started experimenting with Homosaurus and soon realized that in English version it is not quite possible to express or to represent the documents available in multilingual language. And India, you all know that we are a multilingual country. We have presently 22 constitutionally recognized language, of which 10 initially we are targeting. So if we move from this, this bold, given language ISO codes, we are basically targeting Bengali, Hindi, Malayalam, and so on. It includes two groups of languages: Indo-European language group and Dravidian language group. Now, if I move from here to my system, as I said that initially our motive behind using Homosaurus is that we need to include that particular vocabulary control device inside our library automation system. So we downloaded Homosaurus and imported or ported that one in an open source vocabulary management system called Tematrace. It's a lab-based package, and here you can see I can add different multilingual terms like here Bengali and Hindi, you can see in the screen. But one of the problem of this particular vocabulary system, which we can easily integrate inside our library automation system, that it is basically treating multilingual terms as equivalent. But the linked open data principle says that the multilingual terms are also pref level, that is according to the SQS format. So that was the problem. The problem is basically that Homosaurus do not provide us the mark compatible format, and the mark compatible format software is not treating the multilingual terms as per the SQS format. So there, from this particular point of time, we actually moved to another software which is called Vocpage, and this is also an open source software. And here you can see that if we concentrate on this one, that suppose cisgender people. So here you can see I can add in the prep level, SQS prep level, English as well as any number of multilingual terms with their ISO code. And this actually solved our problem. But one of the problem of this Vocpage is that it's a back-end software. You cannot provide the retrieval interface. But the advantage is that as Suwai said many times, Sandrine mentioned that we need a translation platform. If we want to have a global initiative in this for the translation of Homosaurus, we need to provide a platform where people can log on. We need to control their privilege. They can donate their multilingual terms. In that case, it will go fast. So this particular software has this capability. Here you can see as an admin, I can add many terms, I can link many terms, I can add RTFS level, etc. But apart from that, as an admin, I can add users, many users with their respective privileges. I can define the role like translator, contributor, mapper, semantic mapper, etc. And they could have their own privileges, a kind of limited privilege or extended privileges, and they can donate their term, their translation. Then it will go to editorial board, and editorial board will handle or finally decide that which term will go to the main pool. So this particular platform we are planning to use for the Indian language translation. We are presently targeting 10 languages. As I said, in every state as a teacher in library science department, I have students in almost every state. So I took 25 volunteers from 25 different states, and presently 5 states are also equipped with a professor either from the English language literature or from gender studies or from women studies. So library professionals will help to collect the term or to enter the term inside the system, and the faculty member will finally give me the green sign whether this particular term can go to the language pool or not, a translation pool or not. But as I said, this Vocbench is the back-end management system. I can create a vocabulary, I can add people for a collaborative multilingual platform, to develop a collaborative multilingual platform, but it lacks the front end. For the front end, we need to actually establish or need to develop another, or rather not develop, need to use another front-end software, which is again open source, that is called Cosmos. Here you can see in this screen, we can create a software, vocabulary in the Vocbench, multilingual and collaborative way. Then we can port that software in the front end called Cosmos, which is developed by the National Library of Finland, and there it can provide me, language-wise browsing. Suppose this is the Homosaurus. The name is slightly in the intermediary step, so we have not given the name yet. It's a placeholder kind of thing. So I can browse alphabetically, I can determine hierarchy, and I can also search like cisgender. And suppose this cisgender people, and here you can see it is actually picking the term from the backend Vocbench and can tell me that which are the other terms, which are the equivalent terms in other languages. And I can also browse in languages like Bengali or Hindi, and here you can see in this case it will tell me that what are the English equivalent term or Hindi equivalent term. I can search by a particular term, like say suppose from here I am selecting this particular term, and now I am searching here in Bengali. Now you see, I can search and it can retrieve, different languages. So this Vocbench is presently working as a backend for our translation pool for Homosaurus, and Cosmos is we are planning to have as a front end. And this is a tried and tested, combination, because the one of the biggest vocabulary system of the world called AgroVoc, they are also using this one, and that AgroVoc is backed by FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization of United Nations. Now the question comes, as Sandrine mentioned very nicely, that Homosaurus is actually a big set of vocabulary. We need to have a mini Homosaurus. But what we are increasingly feeling at the user end, that Homosaurus is presently in every version, like version 3.3, 3.4. Most of the new terms are racial and ethnic terms. Instead of giving that particular terms as a at the status of a new term, what we can try that mini Homosaurus or the code term of the Homosaurus can be treated at the code level, and different racial ethnic group, different countries, different time facet we can add through a facet based approach, like Wikidata, or different other established vocabulary system in the library domain. We are also doing it, that from the code term we are adding different facet, ethnic terms, time facet, country facet, and then language facet, and many more. So in this way we can keep mini Homosaurus really small and useful, and then we can use different other standard list, like for example recently Mark community developed that LGBTQ, that Library of Congress demographic group term, LGBTQ. So that LGBTQ term, list includes a lot of racial ethnic data that we can refer from Homosaurus to pick up the term and use as a facet. And as Sandrine said that our AI-based translation is slightly poor in performance. That is also our experience. But what I would like to mention here, that here I am showing
Seems like we're having a connection issue.
you basically this language you can see peak level BM, or you can see the entire disk from for the through the REST API actually given us very easy for the translator it quite compatible liver it's basically translation responsibility actually reduced to the using of this kind of machine language translation. But definitely there should be two levels. First level may be done by the machine, and the second level you need human interference, because machines sometimes create mistakes like idiots. So that's all from my end, Soy.
Thank you, Rod, very much. This is really interesting talk that covers both the translation part and as well as the hosting and the editing and publishing and the use. So that's really a lot of content in such a short period of time, such a short presentation. Thank you very much. So next we have some time for all the questions, and of course feel free to propose your ideas, what you're thinking, new platforms that you know, or some new ideas about that can ease this process of translation. So I think we'll first go through the questions that are there in the chat. Let's see what we have. Looks like there's no question there in the chat, right? So anyway, if that's the case, now yeah. So anyone, please feel free to take the microphone and ask the questions.
Yes, feel free just to raise your hand, and if you're comfortable, just unmuting yourself. You can ask the question yourself, or feel free to send your question in the chat still. I have one question to all the speakers, just to start the discussion. Can I start, Shuai?
Yes. Thank
you. So I heard such phrase from KJ. You said that there is certain slowness to adapt from the cultural heritage institutions to maybe LGBTQ+ language, because they're quite slow in their decisions, and some institutions are still, they don't use any specific vocabularies to represent LGBTQ+ heritage. And do you think that as an organization, Homosaurus as an initiative, does it have more possibilities to adapt? Well, you mentioned that you release a new version every 6 months, but what does actually happen during these 6 months? And my question to all participants is, how do you stay in touch with the community, and how do you speed up this process of adaptation? And because you're coming all from different countries, different cultures, I'm very curious about that. How do you keep in touch with the communities in your countries, in your institutions?
Sure. I can start by answering that question. I'm guessing others have answers as well. I can say that one of the things that we rely on is folks reaching out to us with term suggestions, and a lot of people who are here are names that I recognize from people who have reached out. And so we're super grateful to the user community of the Homosaurus because that is our most active base. I will say too that I think there is something specific and special about LGBTQ plus communities with respect to our relationship to language and language development. So there is often a push for really rapid development of new terms in queer and trans communities in response to the appropriation of existing terms or the misuse of those terms in other spaces. And so I think it makes queer and trans terms especially ripe for a linked data vocabulary environment where we can build new terms quickly, we can change scope notes, we can adapt on the fly with having a fairly small size editorial board that can implement changes rapidly. So we do official releases twice a year, but if there are other compelling reasons, we can release 10 times a month if we wanted to, if we had a big batch of new terms or major edits that we needed to make. So we follow our own release schedule, which is quite liberating. I will say that we've already implemented over 200 new terms since June, but we have not released them yet. So we're sort of holding them back. And part of that is also to kind of stabilize the release cycle for our community of users. And of course, for all of the translations that are cropping up. I do also want to just say quickly, as I finish responding, that I really appreciate all the discussions, both over in Slack and in the chat here. I've already, heard some great suggestions and feedback for things we're really going to immediately test out. So thank you for that.
Thanks. Anything
Right.
more to add?
Sorry, I was just going to jump in and say I do have a lot of questions coming into me. If you would like, I can read them off and then you guys can all sort of respond.
You mean the questions on Slack, right? Or private?
I have some questions coming into me through direct message through the meeting chat.
Yeah, let's go through those ones first then.
Oh, I would like to give the possibility to respond to the question I asked because I asked all the speakers, so we can finish with it now and then move on to the next question.
Of course.
Yeah,
So,
I just want to say I copy pasted them from Slack into Zoom chat, Katie. So those are the same ones.
right.
So please, Sandrine, Partha, if you have anything to add about how you stay connected or if you plan to be more connected with communities in your cultures via your institutions, please tell us how you plan to do that or already doing that.
Well, for the French translation, right now we are translating the terms that already exist in the Homosaurus. But when we will start working with the LGBTQ plus advocacy community group that we have a partnership with, we know that they have a lot of volunteers, and we think that they might have some suggestions for us of terms that we might have not thought about. So I think that it will be a good way for us to stay connected.
Yeah, in India, presently we are having one core problem in translation, apart from the technical things and the teething problem, that many of the terms we are having in India related to the domain, that's actually are not available in Homosaurus and quite expected. A huge number of terms we are retrieving every day that don't have any kind of equivalence in Homosaurus presently. So that we are, that's a concern from us presently. And another way to keep, pace with the ongoing changes in every, month but I think this 6-month schedule is quite okay with us because if it is going to change every month and, almost fortnightly, then it is very difficult to cope up with the, backlogs of data, particularly those people like Sandrine and myself that who are actively involved in translation. So 6 years gives us a space to work with the new terms.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. So maybe it's time that we go through the questions there on Slack. Thanks for all those people who commented and then ask questions on Slack. I really appreciate that it triggers. Very glad that it triggers your curiosity and interest. I think we see that people were discussing about Well, so let me ask this question from Jar Mosarico. Are you here? If you are here, you can ask the question yourself.
What was the question?
The question was, will Homosaurus translation be available at homosaurus.org?
Yeah, that was my question. I was asking you about that, and I was recommending the Cosmos for delivering Homosaurus. I was looking at the homosaurus.org, and I found only the English version there, and I thought there would be more languages, but I didn't find any links to the other languages, and that's why I was asking about that.
Right, I think unfortunately at the moment that was the Dutch one was not in the Sparkle endpoint. Am I correct? So the Dutch translation, yeah. So you have to really email us, so that email KJ, for example, to get it.
Okay, I didn't find a link to a Sparkle endpoint, so on the website. So maybe you could put a link there. And then I had a second question, was that would be nice if you put out what is the software which you use for providing the lists on the Homosaurus website. I was interested in how you set it up, the different views for the thesaurus. So there's no link to how it was set up. So I was interested in the software.
I think it was two-party. It was
but maybe you could put a link to the software on the website.
It was something called two-party, and they happen to have a license for it, which is not granted for Homosaurus, but fine, they used it. So yeah, so of course the interface could be improved, right? So we can think about other ways we can improve the interface, especially I think as we get more and more languages. The one that mentioned by Pasa, Cosmos, could be one of the options at front end to show everything a bit better. Yeah,
it's open source, and you can always participate in the development. It's everything is on GitHub, and so you can go up there and see what is on the agenda.
Indeed, yeah, and in fact, we also have the need to publish some more links, the maps, the mappings. So you see that we have so Homosaurus as it develops, it gets more and more domain specific. So of course, when you are indexing articles, books, objects in the library, it's probably not something only about LGBTQ. So therefore, the use of Homosaurus is often coming hand in hand with other structured vocabularies like LCSH or the RVM, as mentioned by Sandrine. So it's really something that is when it comes to use, it's a bit more than that. So of course, then these mappings and also linkings and how they are how they're connected, that's also important. Sometimes these links are same as links. Sometimes these can be scores exact match, scores broader, scores narrower. I think so far what Pasa showed us was that scores broader and narrower are there. And actually, in fact, within Homosaurus, you also see these kind of links. But of course, as you go, Homosaurus is actually not the only available resource here. So you also have other available resources. And if you are interested in developing your own, then please also do the mapping to Homosaurus if you can, so that we know that how much of connection there are. So translating Homosaurus is not the only option. So you can really develop your own. And in fact, if you are interested, you can set up student project that takes over existing LGBTQ vocabularies and make it your own, and then map to Homosaurus terms. We already see that in Czech language, this is probably going to happen because many years ago, people came up with this. People came up with a list of terms that is related to LGBTQ, and also they are all backed with references, literatures, or research papers, research articles. So that's really high quality. However, it would just, if people are not maintaining it, it will then be just wasted. So we really have a lot of, as you can see, it's really an interdisciplinary kind of work, right? Yeah, so I think KJ just posted the pool party link. I can deal with the Sparkle endpoint in a bit, I think.
And just a quick note that hasn't yet been updated with the 3.3 revisions.
Yeah, so here I give you the Sparkle endpoint. If I can just quickly share my screen, I think it might be better that I can just show you what it is like for the Sparkle endpoint. So as you can see, that the Sparkle endpoint is basically the interface that you can deal with linked data. So following this link, you can then find some queries. So it's a bit geeky, I have to say, that in order to deal with this data, you have to write something called the Sparkle queries. So these are basically, well, if you are familiar with databases, then this is just one step away from that. So it's like very similar to the logic of Circle. So it's as you run the query, then you will be able to then download, for example, all the results. So this is this is probably just I didn't look into the queries, but you can then see this as HTML. But of course, there are also other ways that you can download the results. So this basically means you don't have to deal with the entire Homosaurus. You can just deal with some things that is of your interest. So let me stop sharing this. So I put the link already there in the chat. So if you want to play with it more, feel free to do so. Let's go through some. It looks like there are some other questions. So sorry, back to your question, which languages are available? At the moment, only English and Dutch. So of course, we have the willingness to develop and publish more languages there. But so far, it's, well, I mean, as you can see, it takes a lot of time and it's not that easy. And in fact, Homosaurus at the moment comes with a very strict license. So this makes it a little bit difficult if you want to do your own thing with Homosaurus and or publish your own labels, inject your own terms into Homosaurus. So this also means that if you have ideas, if you have thoughts, if you want to make the contribution, contact KJ, and then we'll see how to accommodate your needs. We have more questions here. Let's see. It is really amazing to get into translation windows. Will terms. Here is an interesting question from Adam. Adam said that will terms added in non-English translations be considered for translating back into English for English Homosaurus? Okay, this is interesting. I think this is to do with enriching of Homosaurus terms. So, so we had some internal discussions about this issue, that it's not only about translation, but rather about concepts that is more than what we can handle in English. A very, as mentioned by Sarin, we have this example that is gender, right? So you just gave us an example how gender terms do not correspond to only one Homosaurus term. So this is actually something we are when I was discussing with Andrew, we have some discussion about this. So it's like you probably better think about maintaining these languages relatively independently rather than completely taking everything as just adding a label. We really see the need that we really see the need of not completely gluing yourself to Homo saurus. A very obvious reason is that Homo saurus is constantly being updated, and then your label might be outdated as the term changes. So of course we would think about making this update more easy if you have your own, and then you want to map to Homo saurus. And in the mapping, we found that there are a lot of other terms that is currently not covered by Homo saurus. We would very much like to make this automatic so that new terms are discovered, and then we can find ways to send to the editorial board in of Homo saurus. I think KJ, maybe you have more experience there because you are now dealing with the Spanish translation. Do you deal with this sometimes when you have new terms?
Yeah, thanks, Shuai. I think the way that we've been talking about it and conceptualizing it thus far is sort of imagining not standalone or independent language versions, but ones that run parallel to each other. Our ultimate goal and our hope is that we can at least have close matches that will provide mappings across, because there will be lots of reasons why exact matches won't always be possible. But if we can at least have close matches, then we can have like full mappings. But at the same time, we don't want to limit the development of new terms in non-English languages because the sort of concept doesn't exist in English. So we want to be really careful not to have any sort of kind of imperial force happening with the sort of English version of the Homo saurus. So I think we're really interested in pushing out, and Sandrine's presentation gave a great example of that, where some of the very specific terms that are being developed in French will not have exact equivalents in English, but we can use in those cases a close match relationship there.
Indeed, thanks. Yeah, so of course, all these things that we are discussing are still living in the at the stage of discussion. So we are happy to accommodate all the possibilities of all languages. So in Chinese, we have this kind of Chinese is less gender sensitive. So yeah, so then if you want to go through English to go to French to translate your terms from Chinese to English, you probably also end up with this hassle of going through it through multiple edges. So there can be all kinds of problems. So I think this is today we have this exactly to put all these problems there on the table so that we can see what problems we are going to encounter in the next stages. So there are also other questions there. Thanks for Dorisa for the comment that Workbench is extremely awesome, and now I want to go translate something. So I think this is yeah. So I've also never worked with Workbench. So Pasa, maybe you can explain a little bit how easy it is to set things up there. Is it something people can do as long as we are with a little bit of technical background?
I don't have any technical background. I am a teacher in library and information science, and without a single degree in computer science. So don't worry at all. These are very much doable. And what we are using at the back end, that is the GraphDB free version. And Workbench is very easy to install. You need Java 8. You need to know only how to set Java 8 as your home. That's all. Nothing. And what operating system we are using is Ubuntu LTS version. So anyone can do that. And SQS Cosmos, what we are using, it's developed by National Library of Finland. This is also a Java-based package. At the back end, it takes Fuseki, Apache Jena Fuseki at the back end. So that's a one-click installation. And the real, bottleneck is that how to know that how you can port your backend workbench with the Cosmos. So there is a configuration block you need to create, and the very good examples have been given that how to set up a configuration block for a new vocabulary. Nothing else. So you can do that, and if I could be of any help, so please don't hesitate. I will share my manual, installation step, everything with you.
Right, thanks. Yeah, if you could help setting things up, I think it would really help a lot of people to get involved in the translation. So let's see. Let me quickly go through the other questions. So there is a question from Susan Hofer. Are you here? Okay. Anyway, the question was, does Workbench fully support right to left and bidirectional languages including features such as start with? I'm not sure about this question. Pastor, can you understand the question?
Yeah, may I come in?
So I put the question there in the comment. Maybe you can then see what if you understand the question.
Yes, we in Indian languages we are also having Urdu. Urdu is an RTL language, right to left. Okay, so it supports, and I have also checked the rendering of the glyphs and the ligature, everything with a Urdu expert. So it's working and displaying fine, including searching. So right to left it can handle, but bidirectional I don't have any experience.
Okay, so we have one more question from Charmos Sariko. It's not a question, but more like a comment, right? So are you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
So what is this about FAO?
Just about the Cosmos and Workbench, which were discussed, they are using it quite extensively. And so if you want to have an example, you could have a look at AgraVoc, how it is being worked on, because it's an international group, dozens of languages, and they are publishing new versions like once a month, I think. Right. So it's an example of the editorial process also, and how then they publish it with Cosmos. So if you want to have an example of how it's being done, you can have a look at their process.
Great. Thanks very much for mentioning this. But I mean, I'm not sure if you know this, but do they also deal with a lot of ambiguities in their translations?
I'm not sure, because I'm not part of the editorial group. I've been translating or trying to map some of the Finnish terms there, but Finnish is not the official supported language because they need an official organization to support the language, and I'm a volunteer, so I can't be an official translator.
Right. Thanks. We have a question from Sarah saying, what are the names and the institute of each of the okay, as of now, only show explicitly. Okay, so Sarah, yeah, so we can maybe give, yeah, I think you already have the email address of the institute of everybody, right? But not the email address. So maybe we just quickly write down the email address, so in case if you need any of us for anything, then feel free to contact us. While others are writing it down, let me just quickly go to the other questions. Property is so there's one more question from you. Is the Homo Saurus editorial group doing the mapping from Wikidata? KJ, this seems to be a question for you.
Yeah, actually, another one of our board members, Free Watson, I think is answering it in the chat as we speak. Basically responding that Wikidata has not always, I'll edit the language a bit, has not always had a great history with gender and sexuality. And so, I will just say too, as an aside, that the board's history is, the board's capacity for editing Wikidata is just limited because we have so much other work that we're doing, right? So I think one of the challenges is just like of trying to do this large scale collaboration is also thinking about how we put what we put our labor into. And I think so far Wikidata has not been something we've decided to invest a lot of time in as a board.
Cool. Thanks. I think Jarmo Sariko has also this comment that one way for volunteers. Okay, let me copy this one here. Well, one way for volunteering in other languages would be to add authorized terms from your own language as labels to those Wikidata concepts that are linked to Homosaurus version 3. Of course, in these cases, there should be a reference to the authorized local language thesaurus. Well, this is actually something so Andre and I thought about. So if you have already resources that are there, and then why don't you just simply take advantage of their labels, right? So that's really a good point. However, we don't really know how correct these mappings could be. So for that reason, this has not been quite as well adapted yet in the community. But Jarmo, do you have some experience already working with this?
No, I'm not been active in this area. I'm working on vocabularies, several vocabularies. So that's why I thought I'll give some of my thoughts also in your project. And I was part of the Finnish General Ontology editorial group for over a year, and we did handle a couple of cases of this vocabularies, and then I was looking at Homosaurus also as a source for the concepts, because the concepts are a little cultural dependent, so they are different in different countries, so it was kind of difficult to translate or adopt directly. So that's why I was using Homosaurus. That's why I knew about this project.
Right. In fact, very related to your question, I think Adam just mentioned that Adam just said in the Slack chat, I regularly add the Homosaurus version 3 identifiers to Wikidata items, but I'm not aware of any. Yeah. So Adam, are you here? Are you here in the meeting?
Yes, I am here.
Oh, hello. Yeah, thank you so much for adding Homosaurus terms to Wikidata. So are you I'm not sure, I assume you are doing this manually, right?
Yeah, I'm just, if I encounter them or as new Homosaurus terms are added, I sometimes check to see if there's an item and try to link them up. But I'm not systematically doing that either.
Right. So do you think there is any way that we can make this relatively automatic or semi-automatic?
Well, there's the mix and match program available that was used, I guess, for version 2, and there isn't one for version 3, and I guess that could be a start. I don't use mix and match.
I'd like to comment that we were using also mix and match, and we thought it was quite problematic. So that's why I started using OpenRefine, and instead of a few hundreds, I was able to upload thousands of concepts. So I would suggest that if you have time and volunteering, you could try OpenRefine and try to find matches with that. It was really easy and useful tool, and efficient also, because you could also, with the click of a button, you could publish the mappings directly to Wikidata.
Mm-hmm.
So I recommend that.
Right. Thanks very much for sharing the experience. So Adam, do you have any difficulty or any confusion when you were selecting which one to publish? Because obviously Homosaurus is not the same as it's not a regular not an ordinary vocabulary where everything is explicit. So do you sometimes have this confusion where something was already existing there in Wikidata, and then you have to think about a way to, you have to decide whether a new term is supposed to be added, or is it actually a duplicate, or you know?
Yeah, I was just looking at a term. If you look in the property for version 3, there's a couple of exceptions to the single value constraint, where there's multiple terms in homosaurus, but they put both of the IDs onto one item, and it's unclear to me whether those items should be split up or not. It's actually furry fandom and furries. So furries, I guess, describes a class of people. The fandom describes a culture, I guess, or a subculture. So they are kind of different concepts, and homosaurus recognizes them as different terms. So, but somebody has put both of those IDs on the one item, which has the heading, the label is furry fandom, I think, and the alias is furry. So they've conflated the two concepts into one. And I think regularly that's a kind of issue you have to figure out whether you need to split things up or not.
Right. Thanks. We have some more questions, but I was told that we have less than about 4 minutes left. So, oh, actually, yeah, the last few questions were all about the surveys of the conference, so it's not really directly related to us. So okay, so anyone, if you have any question to ask, comments, things you want to discuss?
Yeah, I have a doubt in mind, so could you please guide me? Sometimes it is very difficult. Say, for example, I'm talking about the local Indian language terms, what we are presently collecting. Sometimes it's very difficult for me, especially as I'm working with my students, that whether this term is a slang or a candidate term for my vocabulary. So how to make a clear-cut distinction between a slang, because we don't want to hurt the community for which we are working. So that's any advice what you people are following?
KJ, this is a question for you, I guess.
Sure. One of the things that we do is actually indicate if a term is slang. We do it in two ways. One, by putting it into a hierarchy where the broader term might be indicating that it is a slang term or a reclaimed term. And then we also indicate it in the scope note. The problem is that those are two components of the vocabulary that don't always then get moved into an information environment where the concept itself might be applied, and then it's kind of isolated from those other descriptive gestures. And I think that's a real challenge. And it's certainly one that information professionals are trying to navigate all the time. So we are very careful about what slurs we put into the vocabulary, and we try to put as much descriptive scaffolding as we can. But I think that it's not always successful in being maintained through the pipeline as the terms are being used.
Presently, we, in case of doubt, we are using the hidden level of SKOS. So there is a concept like that.
And another quick answer would be that you could add qualifiers to it. It'd be a bit heavy-handed, but that would be a way to make sure that the qualifier always stays with the preferred term.
Right. Thank you so much. I think I was told that we have to finish this session now because time's up. Really appreciate all the thank you very much for all the speakers. I'd like to also thank all the people who participated in the discussion. Your ideas are really appreciated. Thanks very much for discussion or brainstorming with us. I'd like to also thank Andre for helping with the co-chairing of the session. Without you, I wouldn't know how I ended up being so strong to be able to stay to stand in front of all these people, which is of course much more experienced than I am. So thank you again, and looking forward to see you in the in some other occasions. Feel free to join us in the Slack. We have our own Slack also. Of course, more discussions are welcome in the LD4 Slack. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you. Bye-bye.